Hello, my name is Camille Campbell. This is my midterm for Business 410. The article that I will be discussing today that brought me to the topic of minimum wage as an ethical issue is Amazon will raise workers' minimum wage to $15 an hour, more than twice the federal minimum. This has brought me to the data selection that I have chosen. I'm going to read an abstract to what is in reference to the ethical minimum wage issue. Minimum wage is defined as the minimum amount of remuneration and the employers legally have to pay to workers for the work performed during a given period, which cannot be reduced by collective agreement or an individual contract. The main purpose of legislation is to ensure that employers do not exploit their workers, and thus it protects workers against unduly low pay. Minimum wage tries to provide a minimum living wage for a considerable amount of working people. Minimum wage exists in more than 90% of ILO member states, which is the UN states. In recent years, global real wage growth has fallen from 1.6% in 2012 to 0.9% in 2015. Decreases in the earnings in the form of wages perpetuates the augments income inequalities in order to overcome inequality gaps. Many countries have adopted or strengthened minimum wages. Such researchers claim that raising the minimum wage causes job loss. They build their assertion on the assumptions of mainstream labor market, which predicts a higher minimum wage will lead to job loss among low-skilled workers. Thus, assumptions have been corrected by researchers that it might have such an effect in some industries and only on young people, not on the other millions of workers. Labor forces and wages are the fundamental components of a labor market. However, minimum wage legislation is within domains of economy, policy, and ethics. In that essence, in that sense, minimum wage can be analyzed and discussed in economic terms. When child labor was banned in many countries, it was not regarded as a loss in production but was thought of as a praise of dignity. In this study, which methodology is theoretical, I will highlight the characteristics of minimum wage in order to claim that it will be rightful to treat minimum wage within an ethical, not an economic perspective. Let's start. I went to Data World, and this is where I downloaded my data from. Workers making minimum wage. It's from the same article, Business Insider. We will go directly to Tableau. This is my data set. It started from year 2002 to year 2017. It is all the states within the United States. It discusses the total of people who are at minimum wage and who are below minimum wage. The first sheet is showing the demographics and the understanding of each state, showing at minimum wage and below minimum wage. It's all broken down here. Washington, Montana, and so forth. This this is in sheet 2. This is minimum wage and the count of minimum wage. So you're seeing the count of minimum wage and minimum wage. It goes down a lot. It decreases a lot. These are the measure names below minimum wage and the total sum. We're going to click on each one to see what's below minimum wage and the count of below minimum wage, which comes to a grand total at the bottom. Now we're going to sheet 4. This is below minimum wage per state. The reason why I utilize this way is because I wanted to show all the people that were below minimum wage within the 50 states and how they are affected ethically by the unemployment rate, which is not considered unemployment, but living below the poverty line, making 725. It is inhabitable for people to live with those conditions and not being able to have the money that they need to survive. This is my dashboard. It isn't fancy because I didn't have as much information as I required, but this is all of the information that is put into one from each individual sheet dashboard. The minimum wage bin, below minimum wage, and I will scroll down so that you can see the states and how they're laid out. At minimum wage and below minimum wage. This is below minimum wages within the states. I hope that you have enjoyed what I have written. I also have this is my concluding remarks. Markets are imperfect and labor market has the highest asymmetries in the sense of material and financial proprietorship. In that sense, typical mainstream analytical tools used for minimum wage could be misled. For instance, the neoliberal income leisure trade-off is like a bad joke for minimum wage receivers because they have no money to spend for leisure. Minimum wage shouldn't be analyzed with the efficiency increasing, cost minimizing, profit maximizing approach. The minimum basic needs, food, shelter, travel to work and school of the workers need not be a subject of vast voluminous economic analysis. It is not just to be in favor of the more powerful in the labor market where the bargaining and bidding power of more powerful the employer is much greater than the employees. Most of minimum wage earners are from sociologically vulnerable groups, the young and old, the females, immigrants, and second-rate citizens, etc. Even a little increase in minimum wage means a lot to these people. Employers face overhead costs, but employees also face overhead costs as food and shelter. Economic transfers, subsidies, and negative income tax can only be used to augment the minimum wage practice, but cannot take its place. Minimum wage legislation is a solid guarantee for the workers, though I find most of the wages very low compared to the excessive increase in profits and in incomes. I suggest that minimum wage should be treated within an ethical, moralistic framework without taking into account of macroeconomics implications and economic calculus. This concludes my midterm.